Okay, this is Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top secret military base by Annie Jacobsen. Now, this is one of those books that's interesting, but probably for totally different reasons than Annie Jacobsen intended. First off, this is by far not an uncensored view of Area 51. We can get that out of the way real quick. But interesting aside on this, I heard her interviewed on the Terry Gross Fresh Air show, and that piqued my interest. And the funny thing was, Terry kind of pulled the main meat of the book out of her in that interview, thus really destroying any incentive to buy the book. If you bought the book, the climax of the book was, you already heard it in Terry Gross's interview. But me being the sucker I am, I went ahead and ordered this on Amazon, and I took it on my honeymoon. I think this was published in 2011. And so, yes, 2011. So, spring of 2011, I heard that interview, ordered it, got it just in time to take on my honeymoon, because that's the kind of guy I am. My wife and I are both avid readers, so we rented a little cabin up in by Taos, New Mexico, and had a good time reading and stomping around the arid high desert and the mountains. It was fantastic. So anyway, back to Area 51. This is a strange book because it is almost tailor-made to try to put out certain fires and certain theories and things that have been out there for a while, like the tunnels rumored tunnels under Nevada and other areas. She tries to dispel that all by saying that really what this is just people telling about these equipment tunnels under the Nevada test site. They dug, in some cases, these really long tunnels for test equipment to monitor the original nuclear tests out there in the Nellis Range, and that is what gets confused with all the crazy stories about underground bases and tunnels and that sort of thing. So see, case closed. And of course, she spends some time on the theory that some of the moon landing was hoaxed out at Area 51, and of course, she explains to us that that's fake too, and all of that. So it's kind of one thing after another of, you kind of get this wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You read this, you're in the know, because those silly conspiracy theorists. They've taken these little bits of information and spun it crazy out of control, and there's really a whole lot of nothing. But that's where things really go off the rails, because she spends, I'd say, the first this much of the book or so, which is a good 3/4 of the book, with that kind of approach. And there is some good information. There's the standard, very, very standard history now. If you've read other books like David Darlington's book on Area 51, a lot of it is very standard history about the ox cart, the AR-71, and the U-2 spy plane, and all those early aircraft programs that were developed out at Area 51. So a lot of that, if you've read those books, there's nothing in this that's going to be like really groundbreaking on that. Again, the first 3/4 of it. So that was a little disappointing, because so much of it was the official history rehashed. Again, nothing uncensored at all about it. And if you're new to the subject, there is some interesting Area 51 trivia. But again, nothing that will blow your mind. Nothing that you're like, wow, I'd never heard anybody say that before. Until we get to the end of the book. Now, this is where things get weird. She starts quoting from this unnamed source who tells her about, that takes her into his confidence about that he has this inside scoop on the Roswell crash, and proceeds to tell her that what this actually was a Nazi disc aircraft captured captured by Stalin. That was when Stalin and when the United States, we had Project Paperclip, and the Russians, they took their share of Nazi scientists, and everybody ran to their side of the court with the requisite Nazis. Well, allegedly, according to Annie Jacobsen, the Nazis that ran over there had the disc-shaped aircraft, and allegedly this was piloted by mutated children from experiments in Nazi concentration camps. But again, a lot of this is really convoluted. But that's the disc that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. So it was a disc. It did have humanoids on it, these like modified human beings. And yes, some of them were alive, some were kept alive in comas. But that part raises an insane amount of questions that are not answered here. You're kind of thrown out this very crazy nugget right there at the end that you're like, okay, that should have been the book. That part right there, just fleshing that out. Unfortunately, as it stands, because it's an unnamed anonymous source, you don't really have anything to go from there. Now, it's my understanding that Nick Redfern has also written on that subject a slightly different angle regarding humanoids and the modified humans being on board this test aircraft or something. But it's interesting for that little nugget alone, and that, of course, is what Terry Gross pried out of her in her interview on Fresh Air. So again, if you heard that, then you could pretty well skip this part of the book and just go straight back to this section about this crashed aircraft. Again, there's so much that leaves you questioning. There's so many questions you want to ask at that point. It's really frustrating because there's a that should have been the book, and as it is, it just kind of ends on that. It's like, hey, isn't this crazy? And then that's where the book ends. That's another one of those things that unfortunately is not really enough to go on here, and it's an anonymous source that there's really not much to check out. And there's a number of ways you could look at it. You could again say, okay, somebody just threw out yet another theory or explanation for what happened at Roswell that's not aliens. So you have the U.S. Air Force over in the Army Air Corps going back all the way to the 40s, releasing all these different explanations over the years for what really happened at Roswell. And this, of course, being the most recent version. And the reason I say this is kind of the U.S. Air Force official account, when you see the rest of her sources and you look up Annie Jacobsen and look what else she's written, she's a party line girl. So she's not going to be putting out anything really groundbreaking, really earth-shattering that goes against the powers that be, so to speak. So all in all, this is not one that I would run right out and get unless you just absolutely have to have a complete library of this sort of thing. It is fascinating, that part where she talks about the aliens being these like modified, mutated humans. But again, it leaves so much open at the end. It's more frustrating than anything else. So anyway, I might come back to this just because her whole section on the moon landing is really interesting. And it's kind of one of those things, when I first stumbled onto some of the moon landing theories and all, I didn't really pay it much mind. But it was books like this that really made me think, okay, maybe there's something to it. When all these guys come out and write these eloquent defenses, it's like, methinks thou protest too much, I think is how Shakespeare put it. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. This is Area 51, a uncensored history of America's top secret military base by Annie Jacobsen. Oh, and one more thing I was thinking about when I was rereading some of this for this review, her section about the tunnels and really trying to dispel the tunnels and, hey, it's a whole lot of nothing there. Years ago, a friend of mine, his dad worked for Lockheed. And when he found out I was interested in this stuff, he let me talk to his dad on the phone one day. And I told his dad about some of the facilities I had heard about, some of the stuff I was looking into. And his dad kind of snickered at that and was like, yeah, yeah, that's a thing, or whatever, he acknowledged that I had stumbled onto some real stuff, but he said, you've really only scratched the surface on some of the technology and some of the secret base stuff. And I was like, oh, really? And he wouldn't give me a location or anything, although I'm pretty sure what he was describing was somewhere in the vicinity of Las Cruces. But he said one time when he was delivering parts to this secret facility, from the moment he said this was under the mountains out there, and he said from the moment he entered the side of this mountain, driving a truck, mind you, driving this road, took him 45 minutes to get underground to this facility. That's how far underground this was. He said, and that's as much as I can tell you. But he said, trust me, the stuff you've stumbled onto is not secret at all. He said there's stuff that will blow your mind. And he also made the comment to his son, my friend, that one time when they were hiking in those mountains around that Las Cruces area, he said these mountains are full of missiles. And that was that. So sometime I need to do a video, I need to just write down a list of some of the anecdotal accounts I have of some of this stuff, because I would love to compare and contrast that with some of the things that you all may have heard about those topics. So I'll leave it at that. Anyway, this is Andy Jacobsen's very forgettable Area 51 from 2011.